Welcome to the Sports Wrap podcast. I'm Mitchel Lea here with Travis Stanley. Travis, how you doing today?
Going pretty well, Mitchell. We got a lot to talk about, mainly forecasting, what we expect to see out of the SunBelt teams for this upcoming football season, and I'm really excited. ASU opens the season off.
Tennessee.
First game of the year.
First game. Tennessee and then hosting Miami
Yeah.
later in the year. First off, before we get to the main SunBelt games, how do you think we're going to fare in those contests?
Okay, so I have tempered expectations for the Tennessee game. I want to at least have a good showing. I think Tennessee will be pretty good after years, particularly the last 5 years, of them not meeting expectations after having terrific recruiting classes. I think they might be the real deal next year. Honestly, as long as we can have a showing kind of like we did against Clemson last year, where we at least made it a game for a quarter and a half, 2 quarters. I went to the Clemson game, and if not for Taylor Lamb's worst game of the year, where it wasn't necessarily a product of Clemson being that good, it was bad decision-making on his part, we would have definitely been in that game probably into the third quarter, I feel like, until they pulled away. So I'd like to be competitive there. And then I think Miami, particularly since that is in Boone.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
I think it is, and I think that's a game that we can be more than competitive. I think we have a chance to win that ball game. I tend to not think Miami is going to be that good, even though they come in with a lot of hype preseason a lot of the time.
That's just Miami, though.
Exactly.
There's a lot of expectations around that university in general.
Exactly, and I still think they feed off of their 5 national championships from the past to a large degree. So I think we have a good chance to win that ball game, and I'm very excited.
Going back to your point about Tennessee, they're a big wild card to me because a lot of times they come in with this preseason hype and they don't meet the expectations. Going back to guys like Tyler Bray and Jonathan Crompton back in the mid-2000s or late 2000s, they haven't met those expectations, and sometimes they tend to do really well out of the gate, so that might not do so well for us. They tend to falter during the SEC competition. So this year, I think if they're for real, I think they'll have their way with us. I just hope that they don't come in and destroy us the way Clemson did. I know Clemson ran through everybody last year, but that'll be a tough competition either way. Appalachian State certainly one of the favorites for the SunBelt Conference, which is why I think that we're so excited about it, because when I first got here, we weren't as good in this conference, and third year in the conference now.
Yeah,
and we've been at the top we've been near the top the last 2 years.
Last 2 years. Yeah.
Second place, I want to say.
Last year second, yes, and then the year before that third.
Yeah.
So we've been building to that moment, and really last year, in my opinion, we were the best team in our conference, if not for us laying an egg against Arkansas State. I mean,
yes, that was a rough game.
Yeah, it was a rough game. I mean, they had a lot of firepower, but I just don't think we were ready to play that game. And I know that had to be very crushing for most of the guys, because they had just came off 2 weeks before that huge Georgia Southern win. Even though we had a very good crowd that night against Georgia Southern. But even though we weren't a sellout, that was the loudest I'd ever heard.
Oh, yeah.
Kid Brewer. I mean, people were hyped for that game. We win that game.
Having our way on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, we win that game in huge fashion. Most everyone is very high on us at that point, and then to come out and lose that game, it really hurt.
Was Arkansas State the title game? If we won that, we just had one more game.
Well, I mean, essentially, we had Idaho left, and I'm not sure if we had another one after Idaho.
New Mexico State, maybe.
I don't think we played New Mexico State. But point being is, we had, frankly, kind of pansies left.
Exactly.
And if we win that game, you feel pretty good about it. You feel pretty good about it. So we dropped that game, and then Jalen Moore really came on strong.
Oh, yeah.
After that game, particularly, he got the ball a lot. He broke our freshman running record for a single game.
Oh, yeah.
Against Idaho, which, I mean, yes, it's against Idaho, but it was Marcus Cox's record.
Exactly.
Which is interesting.
He had a pretty solid freshman year too.
He did. I think he had set that record against Elon, if I'm not mistaken, in a year that was a very poor year for App State football.
Oh, yeah.
That was a highlight of that year, but. I think it would be a huge disappointment if Appalachian didn't win the conference this coming year, because for me it was already a huge disappointment last year, having went 10-2 in the regular season and won our bowl game and all like that.
But
so,
not having that crown.
Yeah,
I get that.
Winning the bowl game helped, but
yeah. So what do you think is the biggest challenge to App State winning this? Maybe not team wise, but maybe position wise on App State. We'll get to the teams here in a bit.
Yeah.
But what do you think is the biggest internal struggle that the Mountaineers have?
Well, if you have to pick anything, I think most people turn their attention to the wide receiver group just because we lost, so much out of that position.
Jones, Bobo Beathard.
Yeah. Most of the guys that made significant impacts last year, for the exception of Shaden Metters, have graduated. And even though we have several talented wide receivers coming in, they're still unproven. You don't exactly know how it's going to work out. Because defensively, I think we'll be fine. We didn't lose as much, other than obviously Ronald Blair, who will be missed. But I think we can replace him kind of by committee. I think we'll have to. But offensively, if we can't throw the ball the way we want, I'm afraid people might load the box against us, because obviously we're going to have to run the football at that point. And we have been able to run the ball just when we wanted to in the past. But
we've also been able to throw as well. And Taylor Lamb, certainly a proven quarterback, 31 touchdowns, 9 interceptions last year. Other than that Clemson game, he's proven he can make good decisions with the ball. But you're right, with these receivers, I feel like even with Malachi Jones last year, he had so much more that I thought we could have gotten from him that we didn't get with the size and just the ability that he had. So it's going to be kind of daunting to see just who will come in and make the plays that McElfresh and Jones did last year. I know you talked about Shaden Metters, and he's certainly been more of a big play type guy, but who do you think could come in and be more of a possession type receiver? Because those are the guys that win you football games.
Yeah. I look at Jaquil Capel. He got injured last year in the Clemson game, actually, later on in that game, and he had a very good game against Clemson. He had several good kick returns that were very impressive. The Clemson fans I was sitting next to was very impressed. They asked who he was, and was interested.
Good guy.
Yeah, he seems to be. I think he could be an impact player. Another guy I would maybe look at, Zy Letman. He was a JUCO guy, and he'll be, I guess, technically, he'll either be a redshirt junior this coming year or a senior. I'm not entirely sure. I need to look. But he's got great size. He seemed to have good hands, and he had several bigger programs kind of looking at him at the JUCO level. So I think he could possibly make an impact as well.
Now, behind Marcus Cox, we obviously all know is pretty much the star of the team. Great running back, absolutely phenomenal. Behind him, we have Jalen Moore and Terrence Upshaw, two completely different styles of running, but they both seem to get the job done. Who do you think gets more of the carries? Because Jalen Moore is obviously more of the shifty, elusive younger guy, and Terrence Upshaw takes a little bit more of a beating, but he'll go 4 or 5 yards per carry after contact.
Yeah, if you were asking me this question in the middle of last season, I would say no question Terrence Upshaw. But Jalen Moore came on so strong at the end of last year and showed so much talent that he really kind of took over that 2 spot from Upshaw, and Upshaw didn't play as much there toward the end. So I would think, depending on what happens in camp, who knows, but I would think it would be more of Moore being that 2 role, or obviously if Moore continues to grow, you might see a split kind of 1.
You think they'll do
situation.
that?
I mean, I think very possibly that both Jalen Moore and Marcus Cox could go over 1,000 yards, and then you still have Terrence Upshaw as being the
400, 500-yard guy.
Yeah, exactly. Goal line situations and other opportunities for him.
See, that's where I see it, as situational type back.
Yeah.
If Marcus Cox maybe isn't getting off to the best start, you give Jalen Moore some more opportunities, but I think Terrence Upshaw's carries will be pretty consistent because he'll be short yardage. He can go for bigger gains, but he's got that tough downhill ability that Cox definitely has some of that, but Jalen Moore is too small to really possess the abilities that Terrence Upshaw has. So like I said, definitely more situational, I think, when it comes to who gets more carries.
Yeah, I look at Upshaw. I see him as more of a power runner, not necessarily a big bruiser, but he's not going to burn you with his speed necessarily. He's going to look to run you over. So particularly if the passing game doesn't go the way we would like, if wide receivers don't come along, you are going to need change of pace backs to keep it, the defense guessing in that regard.
All right, moving on from the Mountaineers, who do you think is our biggest threat going forward to the SunBelt crown?
Well, looking at the SunBelt, the last 2 conference champions, I think both still have an opportunity to contend, and that would be Georgia Southern and Arkansas State, respectively. Both of those schools lost key players, and both are bringing in what looks like could be key additions. Georgia Southern just picked up a offensive line transfer from the University of Georgia who was very talented in high school and had played fairly well at Georgia, but just wasn't seeing the field like he wanted. I think he could be a good addition to that offensive line for them, an offensive line that certainly didn't really need any help. I mean, they can always run the ball, and the guy running the ball for them is most likely going to be the preseason all SunBelt running back, Matt Breida. How do you feel about him?
It always comes between Matt Breida and Marcus Cox for that all SunBelt running back. And I think it's very interesting because they have another guy, I think his name is L.A. Ramsby.
Yeah.
He's in the running back, and their quarterback can run as well. And we were able to kind of contain them a bit last year. I think we play them this year at their place, though, if I'm not mistaken.
We do. Now, the schedule this coming year is going to be interesting, and I think that might lend itself in our favor because our first 2 years in the Sun Belt, we played Georgia Southern, Arkansas State, and Louisiana Lafayette.
Three powerhouses.
And, Georgia Southern, those first 2 years, only played us. They played neither Arkansas State or Louisiana Lafayette. And now the tables have turned. The only power we play is Georgia Southern.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that definitely would bode in our favor. Outside of those two games we alluded to begin the season, the Tennessee game and the Miami game, I think the rest of our schedule is very winnable.
Very winnable.
For the exception of Georgia Southern, but I still think we can beat Georgia Southern.
Not having to play Arkansas State, I think, definitely helps us out a bit. They're the team that was able to get to us late last season. I know they're bringing in a new quarterback. Do you still think they have a really good chance to come in, win the Sun Belt? Because I know I've read in a lot of different places that it's a three-horse race between us, Arkansas State, and Georgia Southern, but the big wild card is Arkansas State at the quarterback position, kind of like where we have with the receivers. But quarterback obviously being the biggest position in football,
yeah.
Arkansas State could come in and just dominate. They could also go 5-7 and miss out on a bowl completely. Where do you think they stand?
I look at their offense and think it is very, pick and plug kind of offense that lends itself to change.
It's a system type thing?
Yeah, I mean, to a large degree. However, you cannot replace a guy like they had last year.
Freddie Knighton.
His name escaped me for a second.
Oh, he escaped everybody at App State, too.
He did. What made him so good is that he could throw as well as he ran. And that's generally not what you run into. They do one or the other,
very well,
better.
But it takes if they run, can't throw as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he did both at a very high level. Whereas what they're going to face next year is they have a quarterback who is certainly able to pass the ball and can run. He's more of a Taylor Lamb in that he can run when he needs to.
He has the ability to run, but he doesn't really do it much. Kind of like, I guess Russell Wilson's a poor example because Russell Wilson never really looks to run, but he can do it.
He has deceiving speed when he does run.
That's deceptive speed. That's a good term.
Yeah, I kind of see their situation at the quarterback position next year kind of like that. But that definitely does limit their offense because even though they did put up some fairly big numbers last year when he was at quarterback, while Freddie Knighton was on on the injury list, it was in a different fashion. It was much more pocket passing, and if they played a good secondary, I mean, they got railroaded at USC. Now, yes, they're playing USC, but I think they only put up 3 on the board, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And for that offense, you wouldn't have expected.
You would figure if they get blown out, it'd be like 60-20.
I mean,
at least put up some type of offensive fight.
Exactly. We scored more, and it was a closer game between us and Clemson than it was them and USC.
And that wasn't a good game.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. I still think they'll be able to move the ball. Arkansas State will, but it will definitely be in a different manner next year.
Out of that middle of the pack crowd, you have teams like Troy and Lafayette. Who do you think is the most likely out of those teams there in the middle to maybe make a push to the top?
I could see Troy being a team that is on the up and up, even though they are undergoing still kind of coaching change.
Played us well last
They played
year.
us very well, and they had other games last season where they played other very good opponents, pretty close, but just wasn't able to win yet. Honestly, Troy reminds me of ASU at the beginning portion of the 2013 season when we
trying to figure it all out.
We finished 7-5, and got hot late, but we were kind of a hot mess, to begin the year, but you could see that we had talent, and I see that being the situation with them. I see them possibly being able to finish fourth maybe. And then you mentioned Lafayette.
A lot of injuries last year.
They
didn't really reach their potential because of that.
They did, and they're another squad that's still trying to figure out who their quarterback is. They didn't really figure that out after Terrence Broadway last year. They played several guys. They even played a wide receiver at quarterback for a while.
Oh, really?
In a few games. Yeah, they just ran Wildcat and just thought how that would work. But that's a program that always has very good recruiting classes. Down in Louisiana, they get a lot of talent. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they were another squad that was able to contend, because really for the 4 or 5 years until Appalachian and Georgia Southern got in the conference, it was really Lafayette's to lose.
Lafayette and Troy were the two I kept hearing about when it came to SunBelt Championships.
Particularly Troy in the early part of the 2000s. They were very dominant.
Yeah, they had a receiver, Jarrell Jernigan, who got drafted by the Giants, and he was just killing it with constant 1,500-yard seasons. Didn't really do much with the Giants, though. Out of all everything in the conference, once it's all said and done, who do you think's 1 and who do you think's 2?
Well, not to be a homer, but I honestly do think Appalachian State is the best team in the SunBelt, and I think it's ours to lose.
I'd say most well-rounded.
Yeah.
Because Georgia Southern can't throw the ball at all.
No.
They are depending everything on that ground game, where you said if they stack the box on us, it might cause some problems. You stack the box on Georgia Southern, what are they going to do?
If you play assignment football against Georgia Southern, you're going to win that game.
Yeah.
Essentially is what it boils down to. I don't know. We'll see, but I see Appalachian State, us being, like you said, the most well-rounded. It's ours to lose. I see us 1, and then 2 is somewhat of a toss-up. I'll probably give the nod to Georgia Southern, just because, like the issues we've already mentioned with Arkansas State, them trying to figure out the quarterback position. But beyond that, what is your feelings on both Idaho and New Mexico State leaving the conference? I mean, obviously they weren't very impactful, and yes, it was a travel nightmare for most of the teams in the Sun Belt. But what does that say about those two schools and also schools like them all around the country? Is it more profitable for teams who don't do very well at the FBS level to just go ahead and drop back down to the FCS level?
Here's the thing about it being profitable. I think it's very profitable for Idaho because they don't have to travel to Appalachian State and Georgia Southern and places like that. So I think the profit-wise for teams like Idaho and New Mexico State to drop out of this conference, I think it's great for them. I think it's great for us because when they were coming to play us, they weren't putting up much of a fight anyway. I think what conference is New Mexico State going to? Because I know Idaho's going to the Big Sky, which is a very competitive FCS.
Honestly, I would have to check. I'm not sure. I want to say maybe the Southland, but I would need to see.
That's the South. That's more like Texas. Well, I guess New Mexico, Texas, around the same area.
Who really cares at this point for conferences, right? I mean, we're in the Sun Belt.
They're going from least competitive to maybe. I don't know about Idaho. Big Sky is a pretty competitive. Carson Wentz just came out of North Dakota State there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they were in the Ohio Valley, actually.
But they played a lot of Big Sky.
They did. I mean, they're in they're the same area. Yeah.
Big Sky, Montana, Eastern Washington, teams like that every single year, very competitive. I think that they made the right decision because clearly no one comes to your games if you don't win.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. If Appalachian State was going 1-11 in the Sun Belt Conference, then I think a move back would be.
I would feel terrible about the move at that point.
Exactly. Exactly. I feel like you're kind of backed into a corner there because you have all these obligations with the conference and all that, and what if this school is doing well in this sport? Because I don't know how Idaho might be killing it with other sports.
Yeah,
but that's what it comes down to. It's all about
money making.
It's all about money making. Yeah, and football is the money making sport.
Particularly football. I mean, basketball to a lesser degree. But if you're bad in basketball and football, which I mean, for Idaho, they didn't even play anything other than football with us, which makes sense, I guess.
New Mexico State was in the WAC, I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think they probably got pretty close to the title game in that. Mm-hmm. But if you're not winning games, you're not selling tickets, and you're not making money. That's what it comes down to. I think it's a good decision for them. I think it's a very self-conscious decision of them to know where they're at and make the decision that, hey, we're not going to play for a national championship. We're not even playing for a SunBelt championship. Let's go down a notch and see what we can do there. They've been in the 1A for quite some time now. I can't remember them and they were competitive in the mid-late 2000s for like a little bit. But by competitive, I mean like bowl eligible.
Yeah,
for
I mean
1 year.
That's the thing with most schools that jump from FCS to FBS is sustained success, because several of them have success around the time they move, because they move in a period where they are successful. I mean, they move in a period where
we couldn't have moved at a worse time, because we were 4-8 coming out of the Southern Conference, and then suddenly we went 7-5. When we moved to the Sun Belt, I'm thinking we're winning 2-3 games this year.
Yeah, I think it wasn't so much a talent thing for us. I think the university and the athletic department really struggled because
new coach.
I mean, a lot of change. Yes, that certainly wasn't the most talented squad that we had at Appalachian.
We didn't have a quarterback.
Yeah, we didn't have a quarterback at the time. I mean, Cam Bryant, he's playing well at Campbell, or did. I mean, I guess he's graduated now.
Different levels.
Yeah, exactly.
We kind of pulverized Campbell.
Yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't even close.
Just a little bit. But I think they struggled, not knowing what to play for, because they couldn't play for a conference championship. They couldn't make the FCS playoffs that last year. I mean, they didn't really know where the program was going.
We didn't have anything to play for the first year either, because we went 7-5, bowl eligible, but you have to sit out that first year.
Yeah.
So I don't really know if that plays into it, but the new coach, new quarterback combo, I think is huge, and I think it's great that they've got it figured out, and they're certainly rolling with it now. And I agree with you. I think Appalachian State takes number 1. Georgia Southern could be number 2, but I'm going to go with Lafayette. Lafayette's my pick for 2, because I think
that's very doable. I
think Arkansas State has some trouble figuring out the quarterback, because you don't just replace a guy like Freddie Knighton. I mean, some schools are able to do that, but Arkansas State isn't Texas. They can't replace Vince Young with Colt McCoy.
Are you high on Elijah McGuire for them, the running back?
He is a very talented running back, I will say that. And if you can control the clock, and if they can throw, because Georgia Southern can control the clock, but they can't throw. They don't have that extra dimension to their game. So I think that's going to hurt them, where it's helped them out in the past. So I'm going App State 1, Lafayette 2. You have App State 1 and Georgia Southern 2?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that'll do it here for the Sports Wrap Podcast Sunbelt Preview. For Travis Stanley, I'm Mitchell Lea, and enjoy the Sunbelt this year.